And this approach is pretty fantastic for relationships of any sort because then we can avoid the toxic ones. It's either we communicate healthily and cooperate with each other, or that's it. It's over. And so there are no games to be played when we have a strong sense of self and we're able to articulate all these things plainly and try to be more understanding to each other. And if we have a concern, we should be able to voice it and then work towards some kind of resolution or getting a better understanding of things and how to take it from there. Right? So the internal work is essential for a much healthier approach to life because then we're changing the game both for ourselves and in relation to others. And doing this will help us to regulate our own emotional and mental well being because now we can see hardship and negative situations in a new light. Right? Like if I get the impression that they are, losing their faith in the relationship or they are mad at me for whatever reason. Like all of these internal assumptions could be articulated, right? Whatever you're feeling, get it down on paper or type it out, do whatever and think about how we could bring this concern to the other person. Right? 90% of the time, these small acts of communication and trying to get that transparency is going to solve the problem because then it's really revealed if they take us seriously or they don't. Right? And so we just have to be on the same page in terms of how we're approaching that conflict. Another thing that happens is that the emotional and mental toll of anything negative happening in our lives is going to be minimized, especially if it's something that's been kind of thrust upon us by someone else or, by something external. Because then we realize that all we could do is our best. And we start to see that a lot of things are just out of our hands because we can't control other people or the external environment. We can't control how the economy goes, for example, at least not directly. Detaching from things becomes way easier. And when we later talk about how to get freedom from anxiety when internal work and philosophy kind of meet, that's when we become the goats. I want to talk about anxiety for a little bit. And so, if we remember, anxiety is when we start to impose our own control onto things outside of our control. And so, one of the examples I'm going to go through here is that if a friend is growing a bit colder, or you feel as if they're getting a little distant, all we can do is communicate, right? This is the only solution we have. And when this was happening to me, this is just how I handled it. And so, for some context, this person was a pretty wild introvert, and her social battery would deplete pretty quick. She told me about how she was struggling maintaining connections with people, and so this was something I was mindful of when approaching the situation. And one day she sent one message essentially being like, "Hey, I'm just going through some personal stuff right now." But her last line read something like, "I'll always admire how you could communicate things." And to me, I got the impression that this sounded like a goodbye, right? With the way it could be read, it sounded like, "Oh, I'll always remember the times we had," or and that would be that. And so it was confusing to me at first because I didn't really sense any kind of tension in terms of how we approached each other or anything like that. I just noticed that it was a friend kind of dropping off. And so after a while of not sending memes and usual stuff like that, I brought it up. And so I wrote, "Hey, I don't want to sound like a skits, but ever since you expressed that you were in that rut again, I've been getting the impression that you've been a bit more distant and aren't talking as much as before. So I was just wondering if you're actually doing okay. There are a couple ways that I could interpret your last message, either that you're going away forever and this is it, or that this is just a little break for you to work on some things on your end. I just wanted to take a moment to ask for a chance to get a better understanding of what led to this point so that I can know how to support you better, or at least have closure and understand why you want to end the friendship. I hope this isn't the end because I value and enjoy our friendship, and I just want to let you know that I'm still here to talk if you ever want to." That was the only thing I could have done, and I covered all the bases. I gave them my impression, I asked them what's actually happening, and I was looking for clarification. And then she actually responded to that one and elaborated on some things, and things carried on from there. But even if that was the end, and there was an insufficient explanation, of course it would be a hurtful experience, because at the end of the day, you still lost your friend. But it's still better when we see it as outside of our control, because then we don't start to ruminate on whether or not things were your fault, right? Because maybe the default intrusive thought is that we weren't good enough, we pissed them off, we did something. A lot of the time when we encounter difficult situations that aren't navigated or approached healthily, the worst contributor to our mental and emotional well-being is us. And once we realize and really internalize that all we could ever do is our best, it really, really changes the game in terms of how we start to approach things.